Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and I'm happy to introduce my guest today. Her name is Virginia Horvath, and she is the president of the State University of New York at Fredonia. Thank you for coming on, Virginia.
It's my pleasure.
It's going to be a fun episode, I just know it. We were talking about how to start the program off here, and we decided we probably should get to the teapots first, because otherwise we'd have you guys at home wondering what this is all about for a while. So, Virginia, why do you have, how many teapots do you have?
Around 600.
600, okay, and the reason for this is?
I started with this particular teapot that my mother gave me. They all have stories. And when I moved into Lanford House, the president's house on Central Avenue in Fredonia, I realized in a house that large with all those shelves, I didn't have knickknacks. I have a lot of books. I wanted something that would get people's attention and show my personality and my commitments. So I started to put teapots there, and people realize when you collect something that you need more things. So I would go to antique stores, or sometimes the doorbell rings and there's a teapot there, and they all have stories. So I started to put them out there, and now it's an important part of the entertaining I do for the campus. About 2,500 visitors a year to the house where I live. And now there are tea parties. I never thought I'd be making scones and serving tea, but it's become part of the tradition at that house. Mm-hmm. So that's why I brought them. They're very interesting, and I like being able to share that with students and members of the community.
Okay, do you have to spend a lot of time dusting then?
Well, that's one nice thing. I would not have 600 teapots if we did not have cleaners from the campus who come and dust.
Is that right? Oh, you're so lucky.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you said every one of your teapots has a story, and you said the blue one there was the first one, and it was given to you by your mother.
Yes. My first teaching position was in East Liverpool, Ohio, a small city on the Ohio River. I called my mother to say, "You won't believe this, I got a job as a faculty member, but you won't know where." And I told her it was in East Liverpool, Ohio. And my mother was quite indignant that, of course she knows East Liverpool, Ohio. It's where Fiesta ware is made. Hall China Company, Sterling, Pearl, Homer Laughlin, long tradition of hotel china. And she said, "I have a present for you next time I see you." And she gave me this teapot, which is a 1941 airflow teapot from Hall China. And she gave it to me because it was the first gift she had ever bought with her own money. When she was 9 years old, she bought it for her father. He passed when I was 2, so I have just a few memories of him. But when I look at this teapot, it has gold trim, but it's worn here. My grandfather worked in construction, and every day when he came home, he wanted tea. So when I look at this teapot, I think of my first job, I think of my mother, I think of my grandfather, and that this is worn from his hand. And so it matters a lot to me. And in that community, there is a museum of ceramics down the street from the campus where I worked. And I got to know the tradition of Ohio potteries. So even then, I started to collect old teapots from that community. And then it started to grow. When I first came to Fredonia, I had about 60 teapots, and I'd never lived in a place where I'd put very many out. But in that large house, there was a lot of room for teapots. And I'm interested in how the basic design, everyone knows the song, handle and spout, right? They all have a handle and a spout. But what people can do with that, artists can take the handle and it becomes part of the octopus, or a typewriter, or a camera. And every one of them has a story of the teapots I have that means something to me. I also like to write poetry, so I have a collection of poems that I've written about the teapots, not really about the pots themselves, but the story behind them. And my goal is to have that as a kind of gift book at Teavana or David's Tea, many of the tea companies that are popular now, so that people know that every one of these heard an awful lot of conversations and has a story to tell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is so beautiful, the one with the octopus. When she first took it out of the box, I thought that I was seeing a bunch of snakes, but...
that would be frightening.
Really? Oh, I love snakes. But, okay, and the typewriter and the camera, are those just meant to be ornamental?
No, we use them, and I'm a bad collector, because when I do tea parties for students or community members, we go through the house and I show the teapots, and then people choose one. So many of these, I'm not a very good collector because I don't leave them in the box, we use them. So people will choose them. This is a functional teapot, and some of the teapots I have are quite old, so I tell people it wouldn't taste very good if there's a lot of crazing inside, but most of them are used.
Oh, wow.
This one was a gift to me from students when I was teaching, and my father had been ill, so I missed a few classes, and then he passed away. So the students bought this teapot for me. It's a red clay teapot that's popular in China. But they said, we knew you'd be sad, and we thought this little mouse face would be something that would cheer you up. And it did. So they brought this red clay Chinese teapot to me.
And then you have some smaller ones out in front.
Some are ornamental, but I find them charming. So I do have a cabinet of very small teapots, including this. This lid does not even move.
Even open.
But it's animals, and this is a hedgehog that I thought was very cute, and 12 little animals. Or this is one of the smallest, but one of my favorites, a Lego teapot, very small.
A Lego.
Lego comes with mugs.
Do they actually make them to go with buildings that the kids make out of Lego?
You can see the bottom. You can put it on the board, or some that are more like trinket boxes. This one is enamel from Calvin Chen, and he takes artist designs and puts. I probably have about 8 or 10 of these by this artist Calvin Chen. Not meant if someone chooses this for a tea. I said, well, we're not really going to put your tea in there. You could look at it, but it wouldn't taste very good, and it's for people who maybe don't think they like tea. It would hold about 3 ounces. And the camera is special to me because my grandfather was a commercial photographer in Buffalo. He opened his studio there in 1910, and we have many of his old photographs and his story. So when I saw that teapot, I was very interested in it.
You thought of him, yeah. So you grew up in the Buffalo area.
Yes.
And, yeah. Well, at least we didn't have to worry about a blizzard today, did
Thank goodness.
For you to drive over here. Okay, so I think we will move along now to the reason that I asked you to be on. It turns out that Ginny and I have something in common, part of it being that we have a mutual friend who has been on my television program a few times, and that is Ann Dinshaw from the American Vegan Society. And I'm going to ask you, Ginny, to tell us how you met Ann.
The first time I met Ann was at one of the dinners that she was hosting. She'd invited me, and it turned out the first time she invited me, I'd said I was going to come, and something happened, as often occurs in my work. So I said, I will definitely be there the next time. And when we met, I was really enjoying her discussion of her work with the restaurants, that she would encourage people to change recipes or to adapt recipes she had so that they could have plant-based offerings. While I was sitting and talking with her, she said to me, so are you vegan or are you vegetarian? And it forced me to examine why I wasn't, because for a long time I'd known that if I had to kill my own food, I would definitely eat a plant-based diet. And the fact that I could buy meat at the grocery store and it doesn't look like animals, and I hadn't thought about dairy or eggs. I'd been thoughtless in it. Why would I make another choice? And it forced me to examine my intentions about food. So that conversation that she asked me, are you committed to a plant-based diet or to being vegetarian, forced me to ask myself, why not? And that led to my choice a few months later to commit to that. And it was a provocative conversation, and I was so glad to meet her and to hear the stories of her family and growing up with that commitment, and to meet Clint, her son, and to see his choices about food and identity and himself.
Oh, sure. Yeah, she is so lucky that she grew up as a vegan from a little baby, basically, you know. Always only eating vegan foods, and she, you know, some young people are rebellious about the way their parents' lifestyle is and so forth, and they want to do something different. But I have to say that she was true to her family. I mean, she grew up, she has the same values that they do. So.
And it's different from what we're taught as Americans about what we need to do to eat and to be healthy. So I think about the pub food that you can get in so many restaurants.
Right.
A lot of frying, that meat is the center, it's the star of the plate.
Oh,
and
yes.
and that's the culture that we grow up in as Americans. And I remember a few times on campus when the dining hall would try to demonstrate that you could go one day a week without meat. So they started Meatless Mondays. But many students were angry. You can't tell me that I can't eat what I need to be strong. And this idea that you have to eat animal flesh and eggs and a lot of protein to be strong is something that so many people grow up with, that making a different choice, if someone's been in that tradition and been a meat eater, becomes increasingly difficult. I've met Carol Adams. Have you met Carol?
No, I guess I
Her
haven't.
family's from Forestville, and her book on the sexual politics of meat was something that I had read in the 90s and forgotten about, even though it's a very powerful book about how our ideas of meat are tied into this idea of strength and masculinity in some ways. So when a student interviewed me, she was taking a course offered by Professor Emily Van Dett about eco writing, so people who are writing about environmental issues, and one was that book. So the student interviewed me and said, what's your view on meat eating? And I said, it's not thoughtful enough. It was just as I was making that transition, and I reread Carol Adams's book. It's very influential in the field. She now has a book, Living with Carnivores. So what it's like for a person who makes a different choice from a family that eats a lot of meat. But she's a very powerful person, and I think she started the rural ministry. She started the work on gleaning and food production from farms here in our county. So you might get her on the show next time she's in town. But I thought her work was very influential as well. The student asked me about sexual politics and meat, and I said, I don't see it as a feminist choice. But when I reread the book, I understood the way people look at meat as a kind of power. And so when you see treatments of women or of people who are different from a person and the relationship with animals, it seemed a similar idea that man has dominion over the earth and the animals. So it tied in for me, and that was also influential.
Well, you know, as far as strength is concerned, I have actually met a few people who are bodybuilders that are vegan. And it's turning out that you don't need meat and any animal, meat or dairy products or anything to build those strong muscles, it turns out.
And some athletes have been outspoken about this, and they incorporate not just a plant-based diet, but one that demonstrates to people that you don't have to eat a dozen eggs or the kinds of things that we saw athletes doing.
Right, right. And like there's one man that I know who actually had been doing bodybuilding and eating a lot of meat because he thought he needed to, and then he found out that his left ventricle was 80% blacked. And he decided he didn't want to do medical stuff anymore, so he did a lot of research and went on a totally plant-based diet, and literally by eating only plant-based foods, he cleaned out all of that crud in that artery, you know, and now that was in his 60s, he's in his 70s now and doesn't have heart disease. So so technically you're actually stronger if you don't eat meat. A lot of people don't realize that when they're eating meat, and this is probably going to sound like I'm trying to gross out the viewing audience when I say this, but it really is dead, rotting flesh is what meat is. So,
well, and when people say to me, I don't get very political with people or try to convert people, but when they ask, how do you stay strong? I say, well, I get my food. I have enough to eat. I don't feel hungry. Or when they ask, don't you miss eggs? Or don't you, when you're sitting in a meal and everyone else is eating foods that you once enjoyed, don't you want that food? But I don't, because I think about what it is, and I no longer have an interest in milk, for example.
Right. Yeah, as far as milk goes, I remember they used to, I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, and I remember there were always ads on television about how you had to drink a glass of milk with every meal in order to have strong bones and strong teeth. And as an adult, I wound up finding out that that was a bunch of propaganda. The federal government was making those ads because they were subsidizing the dairy industry. So of course they wanted us to drink a lot of it.
And part of my motivation is the food industry, because I look at the ways my parents ate and what they did. My father was born in 1930, my mother in 1931. So their youth was spent in the Depression era, when my mother, who lived in great poverty, any food they had, they were glad to have. They rarely had meat.
Right.
But my father also had this idea that when you had enough meat, when you had certain kinds of food, it was a sign that you were nourishing your body and that you had a certain status. So they associated food and food choices with status, but they didn't have processed food. And what happened in the 1950s with mixes and the long list of chemicals that would be in food, that was something that people thought was an elevated or more sophisticated kind of eating. But we know now some of the problems of the food industry. And that's what disturbs me as well. When people grew up on farms, even when they raised their own animals, we knew that it did not have growth hormones or some of the additives for the animal food. And people were not aware at that time of what the production costs were for food. And that was a strong motivator for me. How much water, that precious resource of water, goes to animals, and how much land is producing feed for animals that can be slaughtered. And people who are sharing images of what happens in those slaughterhouses or what happens to animals, and when they are killed for food, the fear that some would say gets in their muscles. I said the industry is deceptive, and telling people you need to eat this, and also telling people not to pay any attention to what's in their food. So the movement to simpler food that does not have chemical additives, and to eat it while it's fresh, and to eat locally, all of those things I think are part of what gives people more choices, instead of saying I have to drink milk to get my vitamins, when that's not necessary.
No, it's not. And in fact, it's been shown that people that eat dairy products are more likely to get osteoporosis than the people that don't. There's something about eating things that are that highly concentrated in protein causes an acid condition in your body, and so your calcium starts to leach out of your bones as a way to try to neutralize the acid.
And I see people adding medication to counteract the food they eat. So a lot of the cholesterol medication is not good for people, but they need it because otherwise the fats and proteins that they're eating that are clogging arteries need to be addressed. So one of my goals was to get into my elderly years on as few medications as possible.
Right. You know, it kind of amazes me. I'm like 69 years old now, and I remember the year that I turned 65, it was kind of amusing in a way. I went to the eye doctor for my yearly checkup, and he wanted to know if I was on any new medications, and I said, no. And he said, oh, aren't you on Coumadin or a blood pressure medication or anything? And I'm going, no, why would I do that? And he goes, oh, you're healthy then? Which just goes to show you most of the people that he sees must, at that age, must need those medications. But they wouldn't have to need them. They could give them up if they'd switch to a plant-based diet. And then the medications have side effects, so...
and then you take another one to counter that side effect.
Right. So, so why would you want to take them?
And people say, I didn't, as if somehow they evolved. They say, I didn't rise to the top of the food chain to eat lettuce. I want to use this organ, this brain, to think we no longer have to kill to survive, that we're smarter. We have more knowledge of nutrition. We have more knowledge of ways that food can be grown and the health benefits of plants.
And you see so many people, if I tell them about the way that I eat, the way that I live, they'll tell me, oh, I can't live like that. I can't live like that. And then even a nurse told me that one time, and you'd think that the people in the medical profession would want to be good role models, but here's a nurse telling me, oh, I can't live like that. You know, people are telling me, I've got health insurance. If something goes wrong, I'll let the doctor take care of me. Well, this is one point I wanted to make today. The doctor cannot, there's no guarantee the doctor can save you if you come down with one of the really serious health problems. A lot of people are dying because they think that way.
And I think it's, again, part of the medical industry that anything that you have, you can go to your doctor and you can get a prescription that will take care of it. Then you hear the long list of side effects. And I think, why would you invite the possibility of all of those instead of making a different choice? That doesn't mean that every medication is something that's evil or people should not take medications they need to control things that are happening in their body. But there are other ways to be healthy than to go to the doctor and get a prescription.
Yeah, there really are. And everybody should be doing it, but unfortunately they're not going to. But by having this conversation today, I hope that somebody takes our advice, at least a few of the people watching.
Well, and even to look at what's in the food we eat and the nutritional value. That was one of the things when I decided to follow a plant-based diet on Fredonia's campus. I would go into the dining hall and I would see something like a sauce or a soup, and I would say, can you tell me whether this is vegan? People would say, no, it's a vegetable soup, but you don't know about the base, right? And they'd say, oh, it's a chicken base, but it's a vegetable soup.
It's a vegetable soup, but there's chicken broth in it.
Right, or baked goods. I would say, what is in this? And they didn't know. Now people know, and that's where I think that my own choices, my own commitments are helping because I ask all of the people who work in the dining hall, what's in this? And they'll know. Some of the people who work there know when they see me that I'm going to ask, does this have egg in it? Are there any dairy products? What's the base of this soup? And they are attentive to that. And they also know that I have an app on my phone that if they can show me the barcode of something, a salad dressing, I can scan it and tell them what's in it. And so
yeah,
I started doing that, and they're putting some stickers on things.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, it's really a fun topic. There's this one couple that comes. We have these monthly Vegetarian Society dinners at the Ywca in Westfield. I hope you could come to some of them sometime.
What day of the week are they? Or does it vary?
We're going to actually, well, right now we're having them on Sunday afternoons during the darker months of the year, so we're not all driving home after dark. But we're having one this coming or not tomorrow, the following Sunday. We're having one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the Y in Westfield. You're welcome to come if you want to.
Thank you.
And but anyways, there's this one couple. They just started coming last year when we started having dinners on Sunday afternoons. When we have them on Wednesday afternoons, which we go back to for the summer months, they hadn't ever been able to come before, and they just started coming last year. And they said that they'd never come before because the husband has to get up at 4 in the morning to go to work. So that would have kept him up too late at night, and they're so happy that they can come now. And he says what he loves about our dinners is it's not like other potluck dinners where you're looking at the food and they're trying to figure out if it's something that's on their vegan diet that they can eat, and that's what they like about our dinners. It's something they can come to, and not have to worry about it.
And it's a relief to go to a place where people understand the question.
Right.
Sometimes you ask, and even people who understand what it means to be vegetarian say, well, do you eat fish? No animal products, and to explain over and over. But I know some restaurants, if there's a restaurant that says everything on the diet is plant-based, there's one in Manhattan that I love to go to called PS Kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a relief to look at the menu and know that everything that's there is plant-based.
Oh, yeah.
And I always eat too much because I'm used to going to a restaurant and saying, now what can I eat?
And you get a little bit of a small side salad, and you're lucky if they remember not to put the cheese on it. Yes, I know what you mean. So you weren't on a meatless diet before you went vegan?
No, but I was eating less and less meat, and I was moving in that direction, but without the full commitment. And really after that dinner, when Anne asked me, are you vegetarian, are you vegan? And I had to say, no, but I can't think of why I'm not. And that forced me to say, why not commit? It's in part social. You can tell from my discussion of the teapots how close I am to my family and the traditions in my family. It seemed rude to me. I'm invited to dinners where I'm an honored guest, and I never wanted to say, I don't eat this, I don't eat that, because my parents, growing up during the Depression, thought that picky eaters were rude. We cleaned our plates, and we were grateful for the food we were given, and to say to someone, I don't eat this or that, it was encultured in me that that's rude, and so much of meals centers on being polite and grateful.
Oh, yeah.
And so I never wanted to tell people. And it was my own daughter who said to me, once I'd made that choice, if you're invited to someone's house, you need to tell them in advance, because they'll be embarrassed if they've prepared something and then you don't eat any of it. That was hard for me to do because of the social connections created by food. But I'm not shy about it anymore. And I do a lot of cooking and baking, and I never knew, once I'd made that choice for myself, do I still cook a turkey at Thanksgiving when I'm the only one eating a plant-based diet? Do I still put butter in my father's cookie recipe that everyone in the family loves? So I learned to cook and say, did you enjoy these cookies? They all watch to see if I eat them, because if I eat them, then they're suspicious. If I don't eat them, they feel relieved, and then I'll tell them later that food you ate did not have butter, did not have milk.
Yeah, there's something called Earth Balance that I use.
I love Earth Balance.
And it's really good tasting too. I mean,
and the avocado, it's avocado based.
Once you've used Earth Balance, you don't care if you ever have butter again. It's kind of like once you've tasted cashew butter, you don't care if you ever get to have peanut butter again.
Right.
So, although to a certain extent, peanut butter is pretty good as long as it's one of the ones that doesn't add a lot of things like sugar and hydrogenated oils and things. But you know, about the fish thing, you know, it is funny. I first went just completely meatless when I was 25 years old. That was when I was starting to practice yoga, and that was, there were reasons that the yoga teachers gave for why it would be best for people practicing yoga not to eat meat. So I kind of went cold turkey on meat, and when I say meat, I meant all animals. I meant chicken and fish too, you know. But so anyway, I went completely meatless, and I'd tell somebody I was vegetarian, and they'd go, "Do you eat chicken or fish?" You'd be surprised at how many times over the years that I have had to put up with people asking me that question.
Well, people don't understand, given the way food and meat take center stage here.
And then even now, I don't hear about the chicken so much. It's like if I tell people, eventually I went vegan, and they'll go, "You don't even eat a little bit of fish or anything?" And you know, some people don't even think that fish are animals. I've even had people argue with me about it, but I've had people argue with me about honeybees, saying that they weren't animals, and I don't know, you know, it's pretty funny, you know, how people think.
But I don't know if you've read the book, Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows.
I haven't read it, but
it's the way we tend to think, that some animals are like us and worthy of our love, and others make good shoes, and others make good bacon, and that's just, if you don't think about the fact that the shoes or the purse or the bacon was an animal, you can live with yourself.
Well, you know, I've looked into like natural therapies for cancer and diets for cancer prevention and so forth. And when I was reading about a certain type of cancer therapy called the Hoxsey natural cancer therapy, one of the things that the Hoxsey people wouldn't let their patients eat was definitely pork, any kind of pork. And they said that when you look at pork cells underneath a microscope, they look very similar to cancer cells. And then somebody else at another time, when she heard me say something about that, this other person had worked in cancer research for a long time. She said something about that the pigs, their DNA was the most similar to humans as any of the animals. And kind of like she was saying, it's cannibalistic to eat pigs. And then some other guy who heard the two of us talking with each other about that mentioned to me that he had read somewhere one time that the cannibalistic types of people, they used to refer to the people that they ate as long pigs. So It's kind of bizarre, really, you know, when you think of it.
And I heard recently that the royal family in England does not eat shellfish, and the reason is that it's the most common way to acquire food poisoning. That shellfish are often contaminated, and they don't want to be traveling and ill or at home and ill.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you think about illnesses that are in animal flesh that people who avoid animal flesh are going to be spared, I suppose. But I think about the other criticisms people have. Well, what do you eat? And we see now people using their brains to say, if people want something that tastes like butter, you can get delicious olive oil that tastes like butter and has no animal in it. Or the things I wish I didn't know, that Ben & Jerry's has a whole line of non-dairy frozen desserts.
Oh.
That's something that Anne introduced me to, that there are
Yeah.
frozen desserts that taste like the ice cream that many people like, but have much less fat and no animal products.
Right, right. Yeah, it's probably a good thing that I live in Mayville, because I don't get to Wegmans too often, you know, and they don't carry the vegan ice creams in Mayville. So it makes it too hard for me to indulge. One of the times that I had these people named Joanne Stryofsky and her daughter Marian, one of the times they did a food demonstration for us. They made ice cream out of frozen bananas. And it's really good tasting too. It's really good tasting, the banana ice cream. It's no dairy, it's just, you can throw in some fruit. They have special machines.
I have one.
Oh,
and
do you?
I bring mine to the office sometimes when we're celebrating a birthday, and some of the students who work in my office really enjoy adding berries or strawberries to bananas and having their frozen
So yours
treats.
is one of those that's specially made to make ice cream out of bananas.
Very noisy.
And-
Very noisy, but
yeah.
I have frozen, if I have peaches or strawberries that I get in season, I put them in the freezer and they taste great. You don't need sugar or milk or anything.
No, it's really good tasting. Yeah, bananas make really good tasting ice cream.
And when you mentioned Wegmans, it reminded me of Rosa Gonzalez. Do you know Rosa? She's a faculty member at Erie Community College. She came from Cuba and she published a book, Plant-Powered Cuban. So she took those Cuban recipes that she grew up with that were all based on shredded beef, and she published this cookbook. She's a committed vegan now, and she does demonstrations in Westfield, has a catering company, and she's someone that inspired me, along with a couple on campus, Stephanie Kayak and Mark Kayak, who've been vegans for a long time.
Yeah.
They would come to campus events and say, there's nothing for us here. And that reminded me of how often we're serving food that leaves people with food preferences or allergies out. That got me to talk with our food service. And Lisa Hunter, she's an associate provost at Fredonia, and she and her husband are committed vegans. They go on vegan cruises, and they had pictures of the food. I always admired when people would live their life according to those commitments. So I've had great people that I've come in contact with who've inspired me, along with Anne.
Yeah, and then I heard a news report back last year sometime. It was after that really bad hurricane had hit Puerto Rico. And I think it was last year sometime I heard a report on the news that a lot of people had, out of necessity, because they didn't have any electricity or anything to cook with, a lot of people had gone over to plant-based diets because they couldn't cook meat or anything.
And raw, because
Right. So, and you get a lot of energy when you're eating only raw plant food too, because basically it's alive when you're eating it, so it gives you a lot of energy. And So it's really it's really amazing. You've probably noticed by now some differences, haven't you?
Sure.
In having made the change.
Yes.
So,
And I think especially, I have a sweet tooth, so if someone puts a plate of cookies in front of me, it's hard for me not to eat all the cookies. And because I know that so many of the baked goods that are served have egg, have butter, it let me say no. And so when I first made that commitment, losing weight was fairly easy because I was just turning down the foods that I had made the choice not to eat.
Oh yeah. Well, anytime you're eating anything with a lot of sugar in it, you're going to gain weight. So, but anyway, we probably ought to talk a little bit about the environmental impact, not just the animal rights, which is horrible for the animals. A lot of people don't know that not as many animals would actually be born if they were natural births because of artificial insemination and like that to keep them producing more and more and more. A lot of people ask, well, what are we supposed to do with all those animals? And it's like, well, there will continue to be too many animals if people keep eating them. But then there's the environmental impact, which is really, really scary. And the thing that bothers me the most when people are talking about global climate change on the news and everything is they keep blaming it all on fossil fuels, but in reality, at least 60% of the greenhouse gases that are contributing towards, global climate change are like 60% is animal agriculture.
Yes.
And technically, it's very safe to drive your car compared to animal agriculture. And I've heard that 70% of the rainforest has been cut down to make grazing land for cattle and so forth, when really we need those trees to provide oxygen for the planet. So to me, that's very, very scary.
Yes, that and the environmental was very persuasive to me. The impact of how much water is saved by our drinking it and using it to grow plants instead of for animals, and the influence of the methane gas from animals. And many of the animals that are in the industry are not what we would think of as animals. Right, in terms of the ways that they're allowed to behave in a small cage, never acting in the ways that you would have animals behave. Or when people say, well, they're free range, well, I'm not sure why in some ways that's a better option for animals, maybe better than a cage, but we know that within a few years the water shortage on our planet will be critical, and our own life depends on having clean water and making good choices and using the land that's available for our sustenance. For a year I had a student from Sri Lanka, a graduate student, stay with me. She didn't know how to cook, but she wanted to learn to cook. So she would open her laptop, and her mother in Sri Lanka, they would be Skyping, and her mother would tell her what to get. We'd go to the grocery store, and we'd spend hours at the grocery store because she wanted to look at everything. But her mother taught her what to do, and she was lifelong, not vegan, but vegetarian. She did eat eggs and milk, but she showed me how she would cook in all these wonderful ways. And when her mother came to stay with us for a few months, every day I came home and there were these delicious meals that never had meat. Would sometimes have milk, but I said I'd prefer coconut to dairy milk, and her mother just used coconut milk. They were delicious. And she taught me a lot about the same kind of principles that we've talked about with and about not harming others for our own sustenance. That was something that resonated with me as well.
Oh, yeah. We probably, now you have a Sprout Cafe at the campus.
Yes.
In Fredonia these days. It's all vegan, is that correct?
Everything there is plant-based in that cafe. And we have a number of cafes around campus. Students can get coffee or a muffin, a piece of fruit, a sandwich. It's all produced there on campus in the commissary. But we have a number of them, and when we open a new one, as we did in our science center a few years ago, one of my points has been we don't need to have the same food in 8 different places on campus.
Right.
So each one should be distinct, and that one in the science center started with bubble tea. I said, that's something students really like, especially the students who come from Asia.
Oh.
So they tried that, not believing that people would like it, but it's very popular to have that tea with tapioca beads in it or pearls in it.
Gosh.
And then when in so many areas, we have one dining hall that's mothballed right now because our enrollment is down from what it was when we opened all those cafes. So when that one opens, I kept saying, we need to have a kitchen, whether we call it a clean kitchen or in some other way, we know the ingredients and we promise that it's based on whole food and not processed food, because many students have allergies, whether they are trying to avoid wheat or they are following a vegetarian diet or they're lactose intolerant. We need to be able to know what's in the food, and there should be one place where everyone knows. So that was something I was pushing for. I was surprised when the director of our FSA, our Faculty Student Association that runs our food service, said, oh, the cafe in Fenton Hall, which is where my office is, will be plant-based this fall. It was a surprise to me, and people said I imposed it. I kept asking questions about what's in the food, and they thought they'd try it given student interest in plant-based eating. It's doing very well. And their goal was to get people who hadn't considered a plant-based diet to choose a muffin there and realize this tastes pretty good. And the aversion people sometimes have. I've been at meals where they say we have 2 options. We have a rice base, and we have skewers on top. Some have shrimp and some are vegan. Which would you prefer? I said, I'll take the vegan. But the person next to me says, I don't eat that. I want the shrimp. Everything was the same, except that his had 3 pieces of shrimp. Everything else was the same. But as soon as you say it's plant-based or vegan, some people will say, no, they don't eat that. So the cafe has lunch and breakfast every day, and there are parking spots there so people from the community can run in. They don't do any cooking right in that cafe. Everything is a grab and go. Sandwiches, soups, the creamer is not milk, and that was an issue for some people who accused the campus of being the milk police.
Well, we better look at those pictures that you have of the food. He already showed the Sprout Cafe sign a minute ago.
So this is an overnight oats, that has, I think, oatmeal and fruit, and that's popular with many people to prepare it the night before, and then you have the blending of the fruit and the oatmeal or tapioca. A lot of the cut fruit is there, salads. Many of the students are using those cafes just to pick something up on their way to or from class. So that's in Sprout Cafe.
These are
muffins that are there, and again, not what people think of as just the vegetables and fruit. In fact, they have chocolate chip cookies that are about this big. I was in a meeting just down the hall, and someone had asked, can we have any snacks? So one of our staff members went down there and bought some of these cookies and said, I got these at the cafe. Oh, those are plant-based. I don't eat that. And then someone broke off part of it and ended up eating the whole cookie. So a lot of it is persuasion, and that's what FSA is trying to do. If we were offering food only for those who are already committed to a plant-based diet, it would be a small group of people. But the soups are delicious. This is a black bean soup.
Yeah, that looks really delicious.
And we have a lot of options with things that are familiar to people. So they make a macaroni and cheese. So they're just a hummus plate with fresh vegetables.
That looks good.
You have me at olives and avocado on that one.
Oh yeah. So and this looks like
shepherd's pie.
Mashed potatoes, shepherd's pie. Yeah.
And there's a macaroni and cheese that's a vegan cheese and spiral noodles. That's one of the things that is frustrating to me. I like pasta, but a lot of pasta has egg in it, and asking people, do you have pasta that has no egg?
I've noticed usually when I buy like whole wheat pasta, it usually says that the only ingredient is whole wheat flour. I think there's got to be some water involved, though, you know, in order to make the dough to make the pasta with. So,
but people aren't aware how often the products that they eat, the food that they eat, has animals in it. This is a zucchini noodle pasta with.
Is that seitan?
Yes.
Seitan is made, for those of you watching that don't know, seitan is made of wheat gluten, and it winds up being very meaty textured for people who don't really, who would like to eat a healthier diet, but of course, unless you're a gluten intolerant.
That actually, I think that dish that we just saw was in a stir fry, not in Sprout Cafe, but in the main dining hall. They do stir fries, and you can pick what pasta you want, what vegetables. So I choose the spiralized vegetables, and they put a vegan marinara in there, and any vegetables you want. That was mushroom based, not seitan.
Oh,
so
it was a mushroom.
Seitan, it was a mushroom based. Chicken. So
and mushrooms are really good for you too. They have anti-cancer effects.
That's a chicken salad. That's one of the pickup lunch options that has salad and a vegan chicken salad. And one of my points is about labeling. It's not chicken. It actually tastes like chicken salad, but it's made with veganase and textured protein. It tastes similar to what people would think of with celery in it or apple with a chicken salad. So those are some of the choices. And this is also at the main dining hall. When I say to people, I'm going to eat the rainbow today, I really do like a colorful plate. Right. And this is just going through the salad bar, and I'm putting this together myself. Of course, I'm having some, what is that day? Maybe
I see broccoli.
But also the fried mushrooms or tater tots or something that's a little potato.
I see that over there.
But the main plate is from the salad bar with peppers and so I'm trying to show, even if you're not at Sprout Cafe, there are places that you can get food according to your preferences and commitments.
Mm-hmm. I'm drooling over these pictures.
I should have brought you some food.
Yeah, I probably would have brought a treat for you, except that I ran out of time to do anything like that with. Now, do you know if all of the pictures have been shown yet?
I don't know. That might be all.
Yeah, probably. You've got some books here that you brought to show. Tell us a little bit about them.
There are a lot of different cookbooks and that are plant-based, gluten-free, all kinds of specialized dietary choices. This one is one that I like because it focuses on the impact environmentally, and we have in this book quotations from famous people about what happens when we start to think about the food industry and what it does to the planet. It takes hundreds of gallons of water to produce a single pound of meat. Mm-hmm. People don't think of that. So I like this combination of recipes and the way the choices we make reflect our commitment to sustenance for the next generations. This one is interesting to me. Lois Anderson, she does these cookbooks based on her own choices for almost 40 years to live according to a plant-based diet. And she does all kinds of treats, and they're easy to follow and inexpensive. So this is a nice gift book because it doesn't cost much. Or this, where we have—
For goodness sake.
And that's from a kitchen. I know that I've never been to that restaurant, but it's some restaurants now are being known for their recipes, and I like to look at anything like what was the famous one in Ywca, Moosewood restaurant. You know,
yeah,
where people— I've never been to that restaurant, but I know the Moosewood recipes, and there are some plant-based restaurants that are now starting to share their recipes.
Right.
And when people say to me, well, I could never be vegan because I grew up in an Italian family, so we love pasta and cheese. There are vegan Italian recipes, and barbecue is sometimes a challenge because people are used to hearing the sound of flesh sizzling on the grill. I know, but I have one called VBQ, and it's all vegan recipes for barbecue.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now, you would be surprised at how many women I hear saying that they would love to be vegetarian or vegan, but they don't because their husband is adamant about eating meat and everything, so they just eat the same things. You know, they just go along with what their husbands want. The only thing is that it's like they're thinking they don't have the right to change the way they eat because the rest of the family doesn't want to. I have a lot of trouble understanding that concept.
Well, and that was one of the things when I reread Carol Adams's book about feminist action, and that women saying, I do have choices about what I put in my own body. It is in conflict with the idea that a good mother, a good wife, a good partner thinks about other people and prepares things according to their wishes. And I do believe too that food can be that for people. If I'm comforting someone and I know they like a certain food, of course you bring them the comfort food. But I'm at a point now with my own children and grandchildren that I'll respect what they want to eat, but I won't prepare it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You shouldn't have to. Yeah.
And if they tease me about my choices, I don't try to persuade them. My husband will eat what I'm eating, and I'll say to him sometimes, "Do you want a hamburger or something?" You can have a hamburger if you want to have it. It doesn't offend me, but I'm not going to eat that. And he's very open to eating whatever I eat.
Yeah, my husband does that too. He's continued over the years to eat, certain things that I don't, but he is 70 years old now and realizes that he probably could, feel better if he ate more like me, and he's been making some changes. As far as this thing with other people's husbands, though, there is one story I wanted to mention about a woman who used to come to our Vegetarian Society dinners. And she, was a married woman with a couple of little kids, and eventually she quit coming to our dinners and went back to eating meat and stuff because that's how her husband wanted it. And a couple of years later, I ran across an obituary for her. She'd gotten breast cancer and died after she went back to eating the standard American diet. So I don't know.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is.
But it's part of that idea of what choices do individuals have? What are our intentions? And when Anne asked me, so are you vegetarian, are you vegan? It forced me to say, what am I? I know that I would not be able to kill an animal for my food.
Yeah.
And why then do I allow it morally for myself for someone else to do that on my behalf. And I just made the choice that that's not what I want to do. I'm not going to berate other people, but the more I can educate people about the impact of those choices, I feel better about that. And on campus, I respect that students now have options as well. And people joke about the freshman 15, and I think now our students, I don't know that it's the same way, but they're conscious about not just weight, but about what they're eating. And some insist that they have comfort foods or things like the chicken finger sub that we wanted to eliminate, and students protested, no, we have to have this. It's 2,700 calories, mostly fried food, and I don't understand it, but some want that food. They'll realize they don't feel well afterwards, but there are many choices for people who want to eat healthy and to know what's in their food and to participate in what we're all doing to respect the planet and each other.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I'm glad you came over to our side. And I hate to say it, but we've run out of time. We've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives. And this has been so much fun having you on, having a chance to get acquainted with you.
Thank you,
and
Gail.
everything. So.